Hi, my name is Ruchira Gupta. I'm the founder of an anti-sex trafficking organization from India called Apne Aap Women Worldwide. We work inside the red light districts and the brothels of India to help women and girls access options which are other than prostitution and also to resist the exploitation in their own lives. We are working in Bihar, in Calcutta, in Delhi and Bombay, and some of these brothels are just 4 by 4 rooms with a small bed stuffed in and iron bars on the window. And girls between the ages of 9 and 13 who are raped repeatedly by 8 or 10 customers a night. Most of these girls are from small villages, from impoverished families. Many are daughters of farmers. They were pulled out of school. They were kidnapped. They were sold. They were coerced. They were tricked and brought into these hellholes and used repeatedly. By the time they turn 20 or 25, a customer does not even want to buy them because they begin to look like cardboard creatures. And the brothels also don't want them because they cannot earn an income from them, and they're thrown out onto the sidewalks. And there they die a slow or a fast death depending on the number of diseases that they have. Many of these girls, because they are used so much inside the brothels repeatedly, every night, every day, by 8 or 10 customers a night, they have to subject themselves to body invasion. They pick up diseases from of course, the sexually transmitted diseases are very obvious, but they also pick up other diseases like insomnia and skin diseases and so many other diseases, which and they also suffer from psychosocial trauma and attention deficiency disorder. And all this they don't know how to deal with, they don't have access to any medical help, plus they don't have any access to any family or kinship. The only people that they get any love from is their children. The brothel managers make sure that they have a couple of children in the first 2 or 3 years that they are in the brothel so that they can hold the child as hostage and the girl cannot run away. Even if she wants to escape, the love of her child keeps her in the brothel. And also what happens is the brothel managers put these girls through a period of seasoning. And the seasoning is known as, of course, outright beatings and physical abuse and verbal abuse, and constantly being told that, now you're a girl who's devalued because you have been physically exploited and sexually exploited. No one is going to marry you. Your family will not accept you. And so these girls are already, they begin to suffer from low self-esteem. They feel they have no other place to go to. And then they're beaten black and blue every time they try to resist a customer or their rape. And on top of that, then they're given a little bit of alcohol and drugs to block out the pain from the repeated rapes and the body invasions. And they slowly become dependent on the drugs and alcohol. And then they are made to have children. And the love of the child keeps them on in the brothels. Plus, what happens is that they're told to call the brothel manager mama, the pimp papa, and to begin to believe that this is their family. And many of these girls begin to suffer from the Stockholm syndrome, which is that they begin to love their kidnappers and believe that any act of kindness by the kidnappers is all that they will get. And so they start even praising the kidnappers by the time the police or NGOs start to come to work with them to rescue them or to help them out. And, these girls are basically unable to even connect with mainstream life for a long time, and it takes very intensive detox programs, psychosocial counseling, and to build trust with the girls again by the time an NGO, a social worker, or a government agency actually makes contact with them. In India, where I work, there are 3 million women and girls who are trapped in prostitution, and of these 3 million, 1.4 million are children. And of the entire 3 million, the average age of entry into prostitution was between 9 and 13 years old. And this is the biggest tragedy, is that the numbers are going up in India of those who are being pulled into prostitution and that the ages are coming down. The youngest I have met is a 7-year-old and ice was used to break her in because she was pre-menstruating. And the reason that these younger and younger girls are being brought into prostitution is because of the demand. There is a huge demand for young girls. Men who are coming to the brothels of India in Sonagachi, Kamchipura, GB Road, they want virgins, they want young girls because they are buying actually a feeling of supremacy, a feeling of domination. So a young docile girl is better for them. There have been researches and studies done on this, and what we found was that the reason that the traffickers are looking for younger and younger girls in the villages is because the customers are telling them, we want a young girl, the younger the better. They are telling them we want a voluptuous looking girl. So what these traffickers are doing is actually pumping them with hormones to make them more voluptuous because they have to be young and voluptuous. They ask for fair-skinned girls. They ask for pretty girls who are always smiling, docile girls. And so the traffickers go around, bring such girls in, and also groom them to become like this, to please the customers. And we have to, as Apne Aap Women Worldwide, we are trying to prevent our young girls from all over India from being pulled into these situations of what I call modern day slavery. These girls are kept in 4x4 rooms with iron bars on the window. They are locked up for 5 years, only brought out for the customers or the clients or the passengers, as they call them, and raped repeatedly, picking up diseases, having children, forced to become dependent on drugs and alcohol. They are subject to so much violence. Cigarette butts are stubbed out on them. Bottles are shoved up their vagina. They have nowhere to go to. They don't trust the police. They begin to believe that the brothel manager and the pimp is the only source of support and kindness after a few months in the brothel. And so they have invisible chains around them. The few who do try to resist are sent back to the brothels by corrupt police officers who tell them this is your only home. And in these situations, what Apne Aap does is that we try to do two things. We try to work inside communities which are at risk for prostitution, which is daughters of women in prostitution. There are certain caste communities who are told that this is their destiny and this is the lot of their caste to be trafficked into prostitution. So girls are actually groomed for prostitution in such communities, and prostitution is passed down from mothers to daughters, and the men in the community actually force the mothers to do so and don't let them resist. And we go inside such communities in the villages, in the slums of India. And what we try to do is open a community classroom and start working with the mothers who really want to protect their daughters from prostitution. The first thing that a mother tells us when we go inside a red light district, when we talk to a woman and ask her, what do you want? She says, I want, whatever has happened to me has happened. My destiny is done, but I want to protect my daughter from the same fate. So can you do something for her? Because sometimes as the woman starts growing older in a brothel, the brothel manager begins to put pressure on her to say that you have to replace yourself with your daughter. And the women really, really want to save their daughters from such a fate. So Apne Aap goes inside these brothel districts and red light districts, talk to the women, and when they tell us that they want to protect their daughters, we ask them to form a mother's group called the Amma Samu. And we start a community classroom and we tell them that inside the red light district, inside the brothels, so this community classroom is not a fancy place. It could just be a room with a straw mat, which is rented by Apne Aap. And that's where the women bring their daughters to, drop them, and we have community teachers who teach the children how to read, write. We also do self-esteem building through art and karate, so that along with what they are reading, their self-confidence and their love for their own bodies also increases, because they grow up in very, very difficult situations inside the brothels. Sometimes they're playing on the floor while their mothers are servicing clients. So once we start teaching the girls, and we also take their brothers into our community classrooms because we don't want to leave the boys out. We start teaching them and preparing them for mainstream school. In a period of a year or so, these kids are ready for mainstream school, and then we tell the mothers that you have to come with us to negotiate for the admissions of your children into the mainstream schools. And we talk to principals of very good schools, missionary schools sometimes, Sometimes we run our own girls' hostel if there are no good schools there. And we go with the mothers and talk to the principal. And very often, principals of these schools refuse. They say that other parents will object because children are coming from the red light area, or these children are not good enough. We don't want children of bad women in our schools. And the mothers actually have very effectively, as a group, been able to negotiate with the principal, saying that we need a chance. We are mothers. They cry, they weep, they talk. And very often the principals agree. And with the help of Apne Aap, we fill up the forms. We help the children with after school help with homework once we enroll them in schools, coaching classes, and we get the children into mainstream schools. Right now, we have 814 daughters of women in prostitution in schools in Bihar and Bengal, all doing well. And the first batch of our daughters of women in prostitution are now in junior college. And has had a huge impact on a community in Bihar which was trapped in intergenerational prostitution, where they seem to feel that they had no future, no change was possible. And now 4 girls from that community went through an Apne Aap community classroom, they went to an Apne Aap girls hostel, went to a mainstream school, and today they are going to college in Patna. So these girls are role models now for the community, and other mothers have hope and other parents have hope that something can happen and change is possible. So that is the first thing that Apne Aap does, is to help women access education for their children, especially their daughters, so that they can be prevented from being sold into prostitution. The second thing we do is also in the community classrooms, we begin to teach the women how to read and write. So at least they can start to keep accounts so that money lenders don't trip them off. If they want to go somewhere, they can actually read the number on the bus to get onto a bus if they have to go. They can start learning how to do math. So if we teach them vocational skills as the next step, and if they help them to start running small savings groups, and from the savings build a capital so that they can start small businesses. So once we get the daughters into school, the next program that we start is livelihoods, to create exit strategies for the women in prostitution who really would love to get out, but they don't know how. They have been abused so much that they have no skills, they have no education, and they really don't know how to begin. And so in the same community classrooms, we start vocational training classes and a little bit of literacy. The literacy is also accompanied by financial literacy and also how to run small businesses. And what we help the women do is to start small businesses in small cooperative groups known as self-empowerment groups. And some of our women are now running tea shops. Others are running a grocery store. In Calcutta, a very unique business has been started by women from the Khidirpur red light area. They call the business Shonar Bangla, which means Golden Bengal, and it's a catering business where they have actually started a roadside kiosk to sell food to daily wage earners. They are cooking certain products, and a 5-star hotel in Calcutta, Kenilworth Hotel, has taught them how to standardize the food that they cook, how to run a small business, and the Tata consultancy service is teaching them how to keep accounts and all of that. So it's become a partnership between the private sector and an NGO like Apne Aap, and a small group of women who are trying to get out of prostitution. And this has been hugely successful in wherever we have tried it. These businesses are local, they are small, they are chosen by the women who know what they can do. There are embroidery cooperatives which are being run by some groups of our women in Delhi. And slowly what happens is that their dependency on the brothel system decreases and their income from the businesses that they start increases. And once they get a sustainable income, they actually move out of the red light area. They buy a plot of land, as Meena has done in Bihar, and built her own mud hut outside of the red light area and get out. Or they rent a place and simply move out of the red light area. So these are the kind of exit strategies and livelihood options that we create for women. who are already prostituted. We also go into places where women are at risk and are likely to be prostituted because they are poor, they are low caste, and they are women or girls. And even there, we do the same thing, and it is much easier, of course, because they haven't been mentally and physically abused. We help them start small businesses. We also sometimes train them for jobs if they are young women. So some of our women have jobs as gas station attendants. Some of them are working as security guards in malls in Calcutta. Some are working in pizza parlors and serving pizzas and delivering pizzas. And each of them feels that now they have got a livelihood along with dignity. And over a period of 10 years that Apne Aap has existed, we've reached out to more than 15,000 women and girls. Right now, we are supporting more than 3,000 women and girls in the 6 different red light areas that we work in. Our model is very sustainable. The one thing that we do find is that to ensure that the girls can access education and the women can access livelihoods, we have to provide legal protection. Because these women come from very marginalized communities, these girls come from very marginalized communities where they do not get legal protection, they don't get police protection. In fact, the police sometimes wants to abuse them because of their caste. They are on the edges of the villages, on the edges of the slums. They are also very often devalued because they are girls, and the parents are poor and don't want cannot afford a dowry for them, and don't have any means of looking after them. So this fatal combination of being poor, being a girl, and being low caste in India takes away all their choices. And prostitution for them is actually an absence of choice. It's not a choice. So and many of these choices, even though government programs and schemes and entitlements exist for these girls, they don't even know about it because they come from such poor and low caste communities that they're kept on the fringes of society. And even the government authorities who should be reaching out to this last girl or the poorest of the poor, the most disenfranchised girl, do not show up there because they feel that her destiny is anyway to be abused and be marginalized. What we have to do is make sure that to access the education or to access the livelihood opportunities that we want these girls to have so that they have options other than prostitution, that they also get legal protection. We teach the women's groups, the Amma Samus, the mothers groups about their rights. We teach the girls, also organize them into small self-empowerment groups of 10 and teach them about their rights. But teaching about rights is very practical. We don't hold a workshop and say, okay, these are your rights, because that means like as if we are talking about, on the moon, there is a goddess waiting to send you some gold. It's not like that. What we actually do is tell them, okay, what is it that you want? So a woman may say that I want a home, because if I live inside a brothel, obviously I cannot control what I do. The brothel manager and the pimp beat me and I don't have a roof over my head. Or when I try to take my daughter to school, the brothel manager beats me and my daughter and says, no, we want you to put your daughter into prostitution. So unless I have a roof over my head or a home, how am I going to get to do it? So then we say that if you want a home, the government of India has policies and entitlements for women to get low-cost housing. But you have to campaign for it because your group, because of your caste, because of your poverty, has been left out. So you have to organize your group and campaign for it. You have to write a petition to the government of India. You have to fill up forms. You have to slogan. You have to organize a meeting with the authority which gives out this low-cost housing. If there are any documents that you need, and you're not getting this housing because you don't even have any documents like voter cards or subsidized food cards or government IDs, argue for those IDs, show up at those authorities. We will go with you, fill up those forms, organize and campaign. And so we teach these women how to organize and campaign, tell them about what is possible, and they learn about their rights through the process of campaigning. what we also do is teach them to organize around the violence in their lives. So initially they organize around police brutality, around being beaten up by a pimp or a customer, or sometimes domestic violence, because very often their pimps become their boyfriends and are living off them. And we teach them how to organize around that violence by going to a police station and filing a complaint, by becoming a witness in a court against a trafficker who tried to say kidnap their daughter or whatever into prostitution, and how to appear in court, how to present a coherent story, how to go to a police station and speak about the abuse, how to even articulate the abuse, because many of the women don't even know that the fact that they're sold into prostitution or pulled into prostitution by traffickers is no fault of theirs. They are not to blame because they are girls and they're poor and they're low caste, but these are larger questions, and they are entitled to police protection. They are entitled to the right to education, which the government of India provides. So what we then do is try to make sure that these women know how to file a police complaint, how to appear in court and testify against a trafficker, how to protect their daughters from being pulled into prostitution, how to go to a government authority and ask for the documents which they should be entitled to as citizens of India, how to fill up a form. These are the kind of legal rights and protections. And as they learn to do this, we slowly build up their self-confidence and their ability to negotiate with authorities by also teaching them how to speak to the media, by writing articles for the newspaper so they can present the problem to society and reduce the stigma and the marginalization. And that also helps the women to stand up to society and to those who are trying to exploit them. And we have had some major victories around this. This year, for example, the very same women who were shy to come to a meeting and were beaten black and blue for trying to take their daughters to our community classrooms slowly fought it out, and then were able to actually get organized, not only to get their daughters into school, but to fight with the district education officers who did not show up when their daughters were pulled out of their homes and put into brothels, to say that you have to go back into the brothels and pull our daughters out, because in India they have the right to education. And then these same women were able to fight for themselves after fighting for their children, because then they realized that they also had rights. So they began to go as a group and get voter ID cards. They began to go as a group and get subsidized food which they were entitled to, but a corrupt officer was not letting them get it. They were able to access small loans from banks and post offices, and through this they began to turn their life around. But then what happened was that they realized that while they were doing all this, what was happening was that they were saving one daughter, two daughters, they were saving themselves up to an extent, but the larger system and the red light areas remained, and the traffickers kept on preying in their communities for other daughters or putting pressure on them continuously to put themselves back in prostitution. And they found it was a tug of war with the traffickers and the police, who were in collusion sometimes with the traffickers to protect themselves and their daughters. So then they realized that the bigger question was that the system of trafficking and the brothels would remain as long as there would be a customer, and that customers needed to be punished severely so that they would not want to buy girls. And if these customers did not want to buy girls, then the traffickers would not see a profit in the business, and therefore their girls and they themselves could be protected. So then they started asking to hold conferences and meetings where more than 10 women started meeting to exchange ideas and solutions in what is called survivor conferences that Apne Aap holds in different states of India. And in these survivor conferences, women started saying that we want a law in India in which the customer is punished severely, in which the traffickers are punished severely, and women and girls are not punished, because the old laws actually put women through the criminal justice system for soliciting in a public place. And so the women felt more guilty, more criminalized, and like the customers and the traffickers go scot-free. In fact, the data till last year in India was that more women were being arrested under anti-trafficking laws than men. So these women held survivor conferences with the help of Apne Aap, in Bihar, in Bengal, in Rajasthan, in Delhi, in Maharashtra, all over the country, drafted the kind of law they wanted and ran a campaign called Cool Men Don't Buy Sex, which included a petition to the President of India saying that, we want you to change the Indian law, the Indian anti-trafficking law, to punish the customer and the trafficker and the pimp. So they wanted punishments of pimps and johns. And when the December 16th bus rape happened in Delhi, all the women were out on the streets marching, asking the government of India to change the law. And the women who had been organizing under the banner of Apne Aap for the last 10 years, these victims and survivors of prostitution, also marched with all the other women who were out on the streets, saying that commercial rape and non-commercial rape is the same and we need the same law to address it. They actually addressed a rally outside Parliament with other women's groups in which they said our bodies are not for sale and we need a law against trafficking as part of this new law which India is creating against all forms of sexual violence against women. And they went and testified to the commission of inquiry which was set up, and they made submissions in writing. And finally, thanks to their efforts, on April 3rd, we actually got a new anti-trafficking law as part of the new law against sexual violence in India, in which the blame has moved from the victim to the perpetrator, and from victims and survivors to pimps and johns. And this is going to be a huge dent to the trafficking industry, as more and more men are arrested for trying to buy these little girls and rape them repeatedly just for the pleasure of domination. So, among the four things that Apne Aap rests its work on, as I described earlier, one of our pillars is the right to education. The second pillar is the right to sustainable and dignified livelihood. The third pillar is the right to independent and safe housing and land, because women need to have the feeling that they have their own property and their own house or land. And the fourth is the right to legal protection, so that they can avail and access the other three rights. And Apne Aap does organizing at the grassroots level by actually going into at-risk communities and organizing girls into small groups known as self-empowerment groups, and so also young women and older women who are victims and survivors of prostitution into these self-empowerment groups. Then we start a community classroom which slowly grows into a bigger community center, and in that community center we do teaching and education and mainstream the girls into mainstream schools and the women into livelihoods through savings and loan groups and small business trainings. At the same time, we do right training and legal protection so that the women can access all these entitlements and subsidies that the government of India has for its poor citizens, but women and girls are not able to access. And through that, reduce their dependency on the brothel. And finally, we help them move out, or if they are not trafficked, to at least be able to control their own destiny by having their own home so that nobody can kick them around and push them around. Because the person who we are trying to reach is what Gandhiji had clearly described as the last girl. And this last girl is someone who is the poorest of the poor. Gandhi had a talisman when he started the freedom struggle in India, and he said that his talisman was that when he wanted to do something, he would shut his eyes and try to think about the poorest and the weakest person he could imagine. And if what he did would affect the fate of that poorest and weakest person in a positive way, he would go ahead and do that thing. So when Apne Aap Women Worldwide started, I did the same thing. I would try to imagine the face of the poorest and the weakest person I knew. And I realized that that poorest and weakest person is not a man. It's the man's wife, the poorest man's wife. The poor farmer's wife is even poorer than the poor farmer. And then I realized that actually that poor farmer's daughter, between the ages of 12 and 19, is the most disenfranchised and the most disrespected. Nobody listens to her, nobody respects her decisions, she has no control over her body, she has no income at all. Her brother is sent to school, she's kept at home to help with family chores. She's constantly told that she's a burden because dowry has to be provided for her. She's put into domestic servitude. She is sold into prostitution. When she's in prostitution, as a child prostitute, her body is abused from morning to night. She's forced to have a couple of children, and she has no recourse to anything to go back to. So I realized that for Apne Aap, the poorest and the weakest person was that last girl, and who was stuck in child prostitution. And I call that person a prostituted child. I don't even use the word child prostitution because it somehow takes away the fact that child prostitution sounds like a verb, whereas prostituted child describes the child. It's a noun and with an adjective which explains what happens to that child, that somebody has done it to the child. And therefore, I use the term prostituted child and prostituted women when talking about this issue. And I appeal to the conference organizers also to spread the word and see how we can change the language, because very often language informs what we think and it influences then what we do. Apne Aap, of course, is constantly reaching out to that prostituted child, and right now we have 814 such children who have been prevented from being prostituted, and then we have another 3,000 who have been prostituted, who we are trying to support in different ways. We are constantly looking for funds, and if you go into the Apne Aap website and want to read more about our strategies of right to education and right to livelihood and right to safe and independent housing, and how we fight for the right to legal protection, you can go into www.apneaap, apneaap.org, or you can just Google me and it'll take you also to the website, and you can see how we take on these strategies, what kind of support we need. We are constantly looking for volunteers, for interns, for funds, online campaigns, because we are always short of funds. We've reached out to 814 kids, but there are 3 million who are trapped in prostitution in India, who are in danger from the time they are conceived till the time they die. And I really would like more support. And I'm talking to so many people in this conference, and I know that through the Guardian we can reach out to so many people. Christmas is round the corner, and if you are thinking of giving a gift, it would be great if you gifted a child freedom by supporting Apne Aap.